It's all in your hands. Unlock your potential with your dream team.
Welcome to another My Thursday. This is MyT.coach. And today on the webinar, we have an author. And I really enjoy having authors to join in and share their insights and tell us about what they found, what they've researched, what they've written, because unlike people who just talk about things, when you put something in writing and you publish a book, it's pretty much out there in ink, and that's pretty hard to take back. So you have to think it through before you really start putting things in ink and going to press. And let me talk a bit about our guest today. So Gary Manis is a leadership strategist. He's a technologist. He's an author. His career spans enterprise IT leadership, organizational transformation, and the human side of digital change. His professional journey, including a defining moment of working inside what he describes as one of the worst corporate cultures in existence, gave him a ground level education in what disengagement actually costs. And that's what his book covers, not just in dollars, but also in human dignity. So that experience launched a years long investigation by Gary into the root causes of employee disengagement and what leaders can actually do about it. The result is his book called The Engagement Crisis and the Four Pillars of Leadership Framework. This is a book that's practical, it's research backed, the system's applicable at every level of leadership in every industry and at every scale. Uh, Gary brings together Gallup engagement research, also a researcher named William Kahn's psychological conditions model, and real world case studies like Campbell Soup, Microland, CERN, which is a research institution, and also the corporate family framework to make a single, you know, urgent argument about this issue. And the engagement crisis is a leadership crisis, and it's solvable. And why I thought bringing Gary on board to talk about his work and his book and what he's found is because it's directly applicable to this AI era that we're going through, and how so many people believe that just having access to AI enabled systems, AI tools, all of this like speed of information and answers at our fingertips are going to make us more productive. And based on what I've learned from Gary already, just on some prior calls, is without the engagement, the the boost of AI is still not going to give companies or individuals what they're expecting to get unless they're getting engagement from other people in the team and from the workforce, right? So, without any further ado, I'd first like to give Gary a chance to add to my sort of top of my head introduction of Gary. Gary, why don't you take the floor?
Oh, it was pretty good. Thank you for that. We could probably conclude right now and just be done with it. No, thank you for that introduction. I've long been a student of leadership, and I've experienced the full spectrum of leadership abilities. I've been with some really great leaders who I enjoyed following, and then I've had some really bad leaders over the years. I've seen this full spectrum of organizations from organizations that desire and pursue highly engaged teams to those that not so much. Also, during the span of my career, I've seen the employee really be devalued over time. And I've watched leadership lose the ability to think long term and to invest long term. And so the combination of all of these factors makes this discussion crucial, especially as we enter the age of AI. It's a perfect time to have this conversation. So thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's start with the crisis itself and setting the stage. I know there's a lot of things we could ask about this part, but when we only have 60 minutes, I'm just going to ask one question on this part is like, when you argue that leadership, not the macroeconomic trends, is the root cause of disengagement.
Yeah.
Why don't you walk us through that argument and where does the data lead us to?
So, great question. So there's some startling data when you look at it. And so let me just give you some stats. In the United States, our current engagement levels are at 31%.
Hmm.
That means 7 out of 10 people are disengaged. The best case scenario is they're just coming to work to collect a paycheck. But that means 70% of our workforce doesn't really care about what they do during the day. And we're actually in better shape than the global levels. Global engagement levels are sitting at 20%. So it's even worse outside the United States. And the numbers that really stop me cold is the cost of what this low engagement brings. Globally, that figure is $10 trillion annually. That's trillion with a T,
Wow.
every year across the globe. That's 9% of GDP. And when you apply that to the US, that's about $2.83 trillion annually. So
Wow.
because of low engagement, we're losing $2.83 trillion every year just in the United States. And so you instinctively go try to look for causes. What can be causing this low engagement? So you look at macroeconomic factors, or you look at inflation, or you look, we're post pandemic now, and we're in the return to office phase, which is having some impact, um, but not to the extent that you would think. Even us baby boomers think this might be generational because there's no school like the old school, right? But all of these factors are not the root cause. In fact, all of these factors just have a slight impact on employee engagement.
Mm.
When you look at the data, and it starts with Gallup, Gallup is the industry expert on engagement, but there have been other studies, and certainly
Mm.
CBS News has done news stories on this over the years. So all studies point to the fact that it's actually leadership values, leadership variables that are causing the malaise in the workforce, and it's direct and it's unambiguous. If you're unhappy at work, leadership is to blame. The numbers bear that out. So this is uncomfortable to me because we're talking about leadership. We're talking about leadership as a society. And when you look at 31% engagement across the board, that means it's everywhere, right?
Mm.
So leadership is to blame. That makes me uncomfortable. What kind of comforts me a little bit is if leadership is to blame, that means leadership is also the fix.
Mm.
And that's something we can fix. Now,
Mm.
the numbers prove this out too. And I have a slide. Let me share.
Before you jump on that slide, let me ask you a quick question here. So,
Yes, sir.
said 2.3 trillion is the cost in the US alone.
2.83. Yes, sir.
2.8, wow, it's even higher. And when we say it's the cost, that means that is profit, not revenue.
Yeah,
It's
and
profit that it's costing the companies.
and these are dollars that don't show up on any P&L. They don't show up anywhere. They're just dollars that we're wasting because we have a disengaged workforce.
So any company that can crack the code and get even like double, like get to 61% engagement, what a competitive advantage that would be for any company.
That's correct. And that's the whole premise really to the engagement crisis is take care of your engagement problem and you'll take care of many problems within an organization. Let me go to that slide and I'll show you.
Okay. Thank you.
Sharon, well, okay. So
Yes.
this is what happens. Today we're at 31%. When organizations um, go down the path of implementing best practice leadership within their organization, this is what that delivers. First of all, your engagement goes from 31% to 70%. So you're flipping engagement. Instead of being 70% disengaged, you're 70% engaged. And that comes with the whole laundry list of other values that the company will reap. I've just put six on here, and I put 23% profitability increase for those who just want to know what the bottom line is. If you're not into all the soft numbers, just tell me what the bottom line is. Well, the bottom line is when you have a highly engaged team, when you have a highly engaged organization, your profitability goes up 23%. Your productivity goes up 18%. Your turnover, and now this is for low turnover organizations, decreases by 51%. And turnover can be an incredibly expensive cost to an organization over the years. That goes down by 51%. High turnover organizations, it's even greater. So your turnover rate goes way down. Your safety incidents go down. Your absenteeism goes way down. And your employee well-being goes way up. That's the benefit to going after best practice leadership and flipping your engagement from where it's at nationally to what it could be. And 70% is kind of the gold standard that
Mm.
Gallup has set. If you can make it to 70% engagement, this is what your organization can expect to benefit from that.
So, are there any, in your research, are there any companies that we can identify as like known to be high engagement?
Yeah, so one of the examples I use in the book is Campbell Soup.
Mm.
And I believe his name was Doug Conant, the CEO who came in. Um, Campbell Soup was kind of wandering. It had a disengaged staff. It was just like any other corporation in America. It had a bad bottom line, so it was heading in the wrong direction.
Mm.
And Doug Connick came in and he focused first on his people. And they made a pact within Campbell Soup. It was Campbell taking care of the employees and the employees taking care of Campbell Soup. So they
Mm.
implemented this and they started tracking using Gallup's Q12 analysis. They started tracking their engagement levels. And he held his leadership accountable for raising engagement levels within the organization.
Mm.
And that turnaround in engagement led to a turnaround of the organization. And it led to an incredible turnaround in profitability. I would have to look the numbers up for that specific case study, but they had an incredible turnaround at Campbell's Soup. And so there are real world examples of organizations that have high engagement and they reap all the benefits of that.
It sounds like just adding that accountability factor for engagement to management goals for annual reviews is just one very powerful thing companies could do.
Correct. Yeah, think of the impact on that. If you're being as a leader, if you're being measured by the engagement levels of your staff, you're going to do everything in your power to create the environment where that engagement level grows.
Mm.
Right? You work towards what you're being scored on, and so if employee engagement is what I'm being scored on, that's what I'm going to work on. That's what I'm going to make sure increases.
Mm. Yeah, I see at the bottom of your slide it said engagement is also a measurement for AI readiness. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so high engagement is a measurement of acceptance of change. So
Mm.
if you have a highly engaged staff, it's in a better position to adapt to change.
Mm.
And the thought goes like this: if you have a highly engaged staff, you come together kind of like a corporate family, and you have each other's backs, and there's nothing that you can't take on. There's no problem that can present itself that the corporate family can't go out and fix.
Mm.
And that includes any disruptors like AI, right? AI is a disruptor in all of our lives. It's the biggest impact in multiple generations now that we're going to see. So it's a
Mm.
big change. Highly engaged teams, highly engaged organizations are positioned to adapt to change. And this
Mm.
is the biggest change of them all. So it's your engagement score is actually a good indicator as to how well you're going to adapt to change.
That makes a lot of sense because even just in the
Yes.
last 2 years, we've seen so many changes within AI itself. New
Right.
tools, newer tools replacing the new tools, going from using a few tools to
Yeah.
many tools, and
Yeah.
makes perfect sense if an organization is primed to change and roll with the opportunities, they'll be able to switch platforms, integrate much easier than those that aren't used to doing this change.
Correct. You have a highly engaged team, a highly engaged organization. They have everything in their tool belt and they feel safe in the process. One of the fundamental things that hopefully we'll talk about this evening is being safe in the workplace, psychological safety. And
Mm,
part of that involves being assured that your job isn't going anywhere, right?
mm.
So you can fully engage and fully adapt to any change that comes your way.
Yeah, there was a different question I wanted to bring up, but I don't know if you have another slide you want to share first.
No, let me leave this thought with this last thought. This is not a personality problem. Low engagement is not a macroeconomic problem. It's not a generational problem. This is squarely a leadership problem. And because it's a leadership problem, it's a solvable problem. So we can go out and fix this.
Okay. Well, that makes us all feel better.
Yeah, right. That's why we're here. That's why we're having the conversation. We can fix this.
Hey, before I ask you another question, why don't you tell us about the QR codes there on your screen?
Sure, the QR codes, and I know they're kind of small, but if you want to get in touch with me, the top one get you to GaryCMannis.com. There's a contact me page there. I would welcome the conversation. Reach out as needed. Um, the bottom one, with the engagement crisis, I've built a toolkit, and it's a toolkit with stock full of tools that you could use, employ within your organization. Hopefully, we'll talk about some of these concepts: leadership compact, leadership behavior compact, stewardship maturity index, structured one-on-ones, and I've just put together some PDFs that give you the place to start. So the bottom one gets you to the place where you can request access to that. You fill out the form, tell me who you are, and then in the response to that, it'll give you the link to the toolkit. And all of those PDFs are available for free. Just download and use as needed.
Yeah, one of the things that really impressed me about you is uh, you wrote this book because it's a passion that you have to address the issue. You want to tell us a bit about that passion?
Sure. I've long, like I said in the opening, I've long been a student of leadership. I've always had these feelings that, hey, leadership isn't as good as it could be, right? It's always been a passion to lead as best I can, and we've been falling short on that. I've found myself in organizations that is just completely fallen short on the leadership side, and it's been disappointing. So the key to all this really started, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago. And I found myself in an organization where I was asked a very good question, and it led me to the four pillars. And it, it's a means to present a structure, present a system really of leading that gives the staff everything it needs to become highly engaged. Before, when this all started, it was just my opinion, right? It was just Gary says, and it was just a bunch of words on paper. It really didn't have backing. But it's been here in the past year and a half, that I've had the ability to go deep and answer the question as to why. Why do I feel this way about leadership? Why do I think we could be doing so much better? And it's been in the past year where I've found the data and I understand the why behind what I felt all along. And that's where I've come across William Kahn's breakthrough document in 1990. We didn't really measure engagement until about the year 2000. And it was William Kahn in 1990 who put out a paper that really identified what employee engagement was and what went into it. And the three psychological factors were meaningfulness, psychological safety, and availability. And
Hmm.
so those three things still apply today. And it's my passion. And what makes this conversation even more critical today is the fact that we're on the edge of the age of AI. And
Hmm.
I don't think we're in a position to adopt the technology. With engagement sitting at 31%, we're not in a good position to adapt to this change. And this is going to be incredibly impactful. And we need to get ready because change is here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember part of your system was around these four pillars. Why don't you tell us about these four pillars of leadership? What are they, and how did they emerge from your own career and your research?
You bet. I do have a slide for that. Okay. The four pillars, and I'll just state them and then we'll drill down into each one. And we'll probably be here a while, Mark. So I want to pause and take each one on its own. But um, the four pillars, just speaking them out: vision fueled, people centric, process driven, and customer focused. And they're presented in order of priority. And so let's go through each one. So, vision fueled, it means vision fueled means that every employee at every level of the organization understands where the organization is going and why they're headed that way. And this can apply to an organization, but it really applies to every level of the organization. Now, a vision isn't just a vision statement. It's not just on a wall or hanging in the break room. This is a living direction that leaders reinforce in every one on one, in every team meeting, in every town hall, and it impacts every decision. Without a good vision in place, good people, good, motivated, hardworking people are all working in the wrong direction. They may not be going in the same direction. And that's
Mm,
what a vision does. It keeps an organization or a team going, moving in the same direction.
mm,
Now, in the book, I present the concept of a vision pyramid. And the whole purpose to it is to emphasize the fact that vision really needs to be present at all levels of the organization, from the smallest teams all the way up to the top. It's not
mm,
just good enough for the organization to have a vision. That's important and it's got to be there. But every level of the organization underneath that has to have its own vision that supports the tier above it. And that's why it's a pyramid, right? The layers support the next layer up. Let me give you an example. I could be a frontline manager with two people working for me. I still need to have a vision. I still need to co-create a vision with my team as to how are we going to increase the value that we deliver. It may be simple, it may be small steps, but every level of the organization should have its own vision, driving you towards bettering the value that you create. And that's what a vision pyramid does. It makes sure that every level of the organization has its own vision to make itself better. The other point I want to make here is that even with great vision statements, and there is a science behind that as well, but even with great vision statements, you need to have a supporting structure underneath it. You need to have everything that goes with it: strategy, objectives, goals, and it goes all the way down to the core level of culture and values. The company has to have good culture and it has to have good values at its base. And that's what everything else is built on. So that's vision. Any thoughts or questions there, Mark?
Um, there's one question that just came in from Michael McGee, and he was asking, why is this notice of low engagement only being recognized now, or has this always been a factor?
Yeah, it's been a factor for multiple generations. And I kind of go through this in the book. I set it up. We didn't have this problem in the post World War II boom, right? Post World War II, engagement wasn't even a thing.
Mm,
We hadn't even identified it as a problem yet. But then, as a country and really as a society, we went through a period towards the end of the 20th century with a lot of change, right? JFK, Martin Luther King, Watergate, Vietnam. We had a lot of impactful things as a society that started to change the way we behave. And along with that came the information age, and it was supposed to be able to make jobs better. But what happened was it really made the world a smaller place, and it made there was more competition and there's globalization. And so what happened during this time was really the devaluation of the individual employee, right? I remember when I first started work, and I'm probably dating myself, but when
Mm-hmm.
I first started work, my health care was free.
Mm-hmm.
My health care was free. And the first year I didn't have a family yet, but my family's health care would have been free also. And and it's just gradually declined from there. And towards the end of the 20th century, there was academic discussion about engagement, and they were wondering what was changing. How how did we get here? Why are we here? So there was an academic discussion that started investigating why people weren't trying at work as hard as they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, in 1990, William Kahn really defined employee engagement, really defined the three psychological conditions that go into it. And then Gallup started measuring it in the year 2000. Now, the Gallup chart has been pretty flatline around 30-31% since we started measuring it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say it's always been there, I mean, since we started measuring it in the year 2000, employee engagement has just kind of been at the level it's at. Now, what's interesting to me in the chart is the only significant increase in employee engagement was during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at what happened during the pandemic, companies were truly concerned about their employees, right? We all went home. We all worked from home for a while. The companies went to extraordinary lengths to take care of their employees, and engagement levels rose. And I think it peaked at 36% in 2019, 2020. And then ever since the pandemic ended and we've been heading back into work, it's been coming down ever since. So to answer your question, Michael, um, it's been there since we started measuring it in 2000.
It's fascinating. I think I'm a little bit older than you, and I do remember when the healthcare, everything was free. There weren't even any deductibles. And also that time when I first started working, big companies had this employment for life philosophy.
Yes.
And, I remember the first year when I was working for one of these big companies, and people were having their 40th year anniversary. People were retiring after 50 years with the company. You join the company in HR, your first day set you up in the pension plan. We didn't have 401ks. It was a pension plan. The company owned it. And the intention was when you retired, the company was going to continue to manage your pension
Yep.
until you kicked off, right? It was
Yep.
just like that all went away before
That
the
all
year 2000,
right.
as you were saying, right?
That all went away, and the devaluation of the employee was in full-fledged by the year 2000. And
Yeah.
so we've been at that level ever since.
And the companies were getting rid of the pensions as well as employment for life mentalities,
Yep.
all because of cost of employment. That
Correct.
was the thing, is they were focused on the cost and not the value.
Right. Right. And that's the whole focus of the people-centric pillar, is that employees are the primary asset of the organization. Employees are how the organization achieves its successes. It's not a cost to be managed, right?
Mhm.
And employees in a truly engaged environment, employees take real investment,
Mhm.
structured development, regular and highly structured one-on-ones, genuine recognition that, hey, Mark, you're doing a great job. That
Mhm.
doesn't work. Hey, Mark, that change you did brought our customer calls down by 18% last month. Thank you for that. That's
Mhm.
how your feedback needs to be. It needs to be genuine recognition.
Mhm.
I also introduced the concept of leader behavior compact, and that is a very public this is the way we expect our leaders to behave.
Mm.
And the leaders sign it. They say, this is how I'm going to behave. And so it's out in the open. It's a mutual commitment between leaders and employees, and it makes the expectations on how leaders behave out in the open, and it settles things before they become grievances. So the whole thing about the people-centric pillar is to create an environment such that employees become stewards of the
Mm.
organization, right? Employees now own the organization. Instead of it being, well, the company is doing this, they say, my company is doing this effort. And it goes all the way down to the team level, right? Well, the team is off doing this. No, it's my team. My team is doing this effort, and I'm going to help them out as much as possible. So the whole point to the people-centric pillars is the process of creating the environment where employees have everything they need to
Mm.
invest themselves into the organization and take ownership of it to create stewardship.
I just made a very key link from what you said here with the second pillar. And I remember that I got my MBA at University of Chicago. It's a very high rated school. And
Hmm.
I remember in our competitive strategy class, we had a long 2 hour debate about what is the what are sustainable advantages? What's the most powerful sustainable advantage a company could have? And people were arguing back and forth. And finally, the conclusion was, and the professor agreed, that a company's brand is the strongest possible strategic advantage it can develop and have. Nobody
Right.
can copy your brand. They can copy your IP, they copy your distribution channels, everything except your brand is something you can own and manage as a company that distinguishes you and adds value. And the link is that the brand is an outgrowth of your company's culture.
Correct.
Without a strong culture that makes that brand happen everywhere in the company, you can't have a good brand with a bad culture.
Correct.
And the culture is 100% dependent on the people and the leaders, which is your pillar number two.
Correct. Correct. And pillar number two is about making that organizational brand for the employees, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
if you create the environment right, um, first of all, talent can't wait to work for you, right? Talent keeps coming at you because they want to work for you. They don't just tolerate you during the day, right? So you're creating an environment where people want to stay, they want to invest themselves, and they want to grow. And that's what the whole point of the people-centric pillar is.
well, that's great.
So if we look at process driven really comes from my background in IT,
Mm,
and specifically IT service management. There's this thing out there called ITIL. I think it stands for Information Technology Infrastructure Library, something like that. But it's a set of guiding principles and a set of recommended processes to make IT service management as best as it can be in any organization. But the guiding principles are very cool in that they apply to anything, even outside of IT. For instance, guiding principle number one is focus on value, right? You do that from an IT perspective. You do that from any organizational perspective. You focus on the value that you're delivering. Um,
mm,
Second principle, start where you are. You don't come in and change the world in a day, right? You don't boil the ocean, you boil it a cup at a time.
mm,
Um, so start where you're at, progress iteratively and with feedback. So you take it small steps at a time and you make sure that there's dialogue in the process. And that's the first three. But all of them, all there, and there's seven guiding ITIL principles. All of them have application far beyond IT. And so a good process definition protects capacity of the individuals. It establishes clear ownership of processes and tasks. And it does everything it can to reduce the organizational chaos, the noise that's out there. And it's that noise that make leaders reactive instead of proactive. And having a good process-driven system actually impacts pillar number two because you can't be people-centric if you're in constant firefighting mode. Your staff wouldn't have the capacity. So a good process-driven organization protects the capacity of its staff. I also want to point out here that you don't want to have your processes defined. You want to be able to repeat your successes through having good process definition, but you don't want that process definition to be so constricting that it stifles innovation. And I've got a quick story. I worked for an organization once. It was a really good organization, and our IT department had defined its processes. Now the problem is that the process was a 20-foot long chart down the wall in the basement of the building, and the attention to detail on the process was admirable, and it was a cool process to be a part of. But the problem is every change, regardless of size, had to go through that process. So I was approached with a simple prompt change on a POS screen one day from a business customer, and uh, and that change, that simple change. Now the prompt they wanted was actually shorter than the one that was there, so there's no screen size problem. It's not data, so we're not dealing with anything. It was just a simple prompt change on a screen. And in order to produce that, I would have had to have produced a design document. I would have had to have had a full implementation and backout plan. I would have had to have presented that design doc to the change review board and answered any questions they had on the prompt change. The problem is that the process definition was so constricting that it stifled our ability to deliver value. And that was eventually corrected. We did correct that in that organization, and we created the concept of quick hits, something you could do just very quickly. It had minimal impact. There was no risk. So they did fix it, but man, there for a while, the process was defined and it just stifled us. It stifled us from delivering value. So that's the process driven pillar. Protect capacity, identify ownership, reduce organizational noise.
Mm.
Any thoughts or questions there?
No, I just had a similar type of experience. One of the companies I worked for, they were really the leader in the industry, number one market share, most profitable, strong brand, everything. And then they implemented like this 20-step process to develop new products. And
Hmm.
that's really when the wheels started coming off the cart for this company. It became so bureaucratic, late to market, higher costs. Really, they lost their leadership position at that point. And it's not that process is bad, it's just having the
No.
wrong process, right?
Right, you got to find balance.
Yeah, you can't say, hey, more detail is better, or having it, more
Right.
more gates is better, more reviews is better. It's just like it has to make sense for the business.
Right. Now there were times on the process as it was defined, as I described, there were times where all of those mechanisms need to be there. If you're implementing major system revisions,
Mm,
then you need to have quality control in place and you need to have multiple eyes looking on it. But if you're changing a prompt on a screen, you don't need all that.
right.
You don't need all that.
Mm,
The fourth pillar is customer focused, and it's the fourth and final pillar, and it's placed here on purpose. And I always say it that way too. The customer comes last. And I say it that way to get the effect, right? I know people's hearts are beating. No, no, that'll never work. Customer comes first. But I always explain it this way. If you don't have a vision, what's the customer going to see? If you're not people centric, if you don't take care of your people, how are they going to be treated? And the example of this is how many times have you been on hold for the next available customer service representative and it's 45 minutes out? How many times have you wanted to scream into the phone? And then when you finally get in touch with them, they don't really care, right? Um, they're just going down the list. They're going down the script. And so how are your customers going to be treated if you don't treat your people well?
Mhm.
How are customers going to experience repeat successes if you don't have your processes well defined,
Mhm.
right? If you don't have your processes defined to where you can continually um, gain your successes, then any success they had was luck the first time through. So this is our opportunity to change paradigms. I want to change it from a customer first mindset, which is really based on heroics when you think about it. Because when do you whip the customer first mantra out? You're dealing with an angry customer in some way, shape, or form. They're either standing in front of you, or you have an email or a ticket from a help desk system. Somebody's mad at you. And so you whip the customer first mantra out and you say, well, customer's always right. I'm going to
Mhm.
fix this. And then some extraordinary event happens, some heroic happens, and the customer is eventually satisfied. I want to turn that paradigm into a customer most paradigm.
Mhm.
And a customer most paradigm means that the customer is going to be the benefactor to the first three pillars, right? They're going to be the benefactor to your vision. They're going to be the benefactor to being treated, to your employees being treated well. And they're going to be the benefactor for repeat successes. So customer most, instead of depending on heroics, just delivers excellence as a matter of process. It's just what you do, right? You don't need heroics to save the day. You just deliver value all the time. So that's the four pillars. Any thoughts on the customer pillar?
Yes, absolutely. And I really like how you have the crosshairs on that
Mm-hmm.
customer icon because,
Yep.
in my experience, a company that chooses its customers correctly is able to focus its processes to deliver in an outstanding way to that segment of customers.
Right.
And as a product manager, I came up through the marketing ranks. The challenge for me is to keep the product focus on the right group of customers from all the customers you can attract, like within two standard deviations of the
Mm-hmm.
middle of a market segment. And you always had some salesperson coming in with an oddball outlier customer with a request to take your standardized product that you have like on target, within the cost parameters, on time, delivery, everything. And then they want to add a bunch of features that only that one customer wants, right? So you really have to choose your customers well so you
Correct.
can serve them. And the example that I used to use within that company was there's reasons why BMW doesn't make a minivan, right? Because they're
Yeah.
all about the performance car, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it's a four-door car, it's a sedan, it's a two-seater, it's always wanting to be the sportiest version of car in every category. And so that's why there's no minivan and no truck in BMW, right? And so that's
Right.
that's why I like the way you say customer focused. You define that customer, put them in the crosshairs. Those are the people that you're serving, right?
That's true. I've been in organizations that have tried to be everything to everybody, and it's just caused chaos in the end. So you're right. Define your customers, and be loud about it. Right. The best thing you can do as an organization is have very good customer communications in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form, whatever that form takes. But you be loud about that, and sometimes the best way to take care of them is to say no to certain things. You're absolutely right.
So let's switch gears here and talk about the psychology of engagement. Like you introduced this concept of the destination employment location. What distinguishes that kind of company from just being a good place to work?
Yeah. So I try to think of it like this. So a good place to work can be thought of as really a judgment about how organizations treat employees at a moment in time, right?
Mm,
This is a good place to work. A destination employment location really is something that's structural. It's an organizational brand. We talked about organizational brand earlier. It's an
mm,
organizational brand built on consistent leadership behavior. and it makes your talent seek you out instead of tolerating you, like I said before, right? That's
Mhm.
a destination employment location. The employees choose to stay and to grow and to invest themselves into what the organization is doing. And a destination employment location provides all three psychological conditions for high engagement: meaningfulness of the role. My job means something. Um, I'm producing value for the organization, and the organization values me. That's meaningfulness. Psychological safety. Hey, my job's not going anywhere, and I can provide feedback to my leadership team without fear of retribution. My ideas are welcomed. That's psychological safety. And then availability is what happens when your process driven organization protects your capacity, right? I've been in the one organization I was in, 55-hour weeks were expected. And I tell you what, I was dog tired by the time I left that organization. That's not protecting my capacity. And that's not protecting my availability to bring my best self to the role. So, a destination employment location is not a destination you arrive at, it's a standard that you maintain. And it's built entirely on your leaders and their value. And it's really built on how the leaders act and behave when nobody's looking, right? That's the true measure of how good your leadership is. If they consistently apply the values and of the culture, then that's where you're going to get the value. And that's a destination employment location. People choose to stay. People can't wait to get to work and can't wait to do their job.
It's interesting you're mentioning this 55-hour work week, and I've heard companies, brag about that, like their employees work so hard. And the thought I always have is, I really respect people and organizations that maintain their assets, that take good care of their machines, their people, their trucks, their everything, right?
Exactly.
Have good cybersecurity on their networks, they protect their data. They're just very responsible about everything that they touch as a company. And
Right.
I think about like if they're overworking their employees, they're not intending to maintain those employees
Mm-mm.
mental health, physical health, their well-being, right? That's just like
No.
intending to burn them out and then replace them, right?
Correct. Correct. And that was at this organization, when I left it, I couldn't remember the last time I had a weekend off. And that's not healthy. That's not healthy for me as an individual. It's not healthy for the organization because I'm dragging myself in on Mondays. I don't
Mm.
want to be there. I'm dog tired, but I come in because it's my job. But I may not be fully engaged because of that. So yes, organizations have to take care of their people.
Now let's talk about AI, the future, and the stakes involved. I know that from our prior discussions, you push back on AI as cost savings as the narrative. And, what's the alternative mental model you want leaders to adopt regarding AI?
Yeah. I have a slide for this too, if I
Oh,
may.
awesome.
So this is a great discussion. I just thank you for this opportunity.
I enjoyed
Um,
it too.
so here's the typical cost savings narrative. It goes like this: AI can do what three people do today. So the concept is we're going to get rid of two positions and pocket the rest. And that sounds great. It sounds enticing. In fact, it sounds kind of seductive, right? Because it's a number on a spreadsheet and it looks a lot like ROI.
Mhm.
It looks like you're going to make that return on investment that you made into Gen AI. The problem is that's optimizing for the short term and it's destroying the long term along the way.
Mhm.
And leaders and organizations are not tracking what it really means to make those type of decisions. It's like they don't, you know, employees are just a cost to be managed. The value of the employee has dipped to the point to where organizations really don't care. We're going to get rid of these jobs and realize that return on investment. So here's what happens when you do that. When you use AI to reduce headcount, you send an unmistakable message to the rest of the staff, the staff that survived the cut, and that message is you're next, right? You're next. And that message is one of the fastest ways to destroy safety, psychological safety within an organization. And with that, your engagement's going to tank. And if your engagement tanks, that means you're no longer in a position to adopt change the way you should. And worse than that, Gallup has come out and said, hey, there's the figure I didn't tell you is that there's 17% of the workforce is actively disengaged. These people are create such a stir at work, they're actually costing you more having them employed than just letting them go. These active disengaged people, they're so mad that they're costing you money. Now, Gallup says this with especially with Gen AI, this could be a security risk. If you
Mhm.
put an advanced tool like Gen AI in the hands of the 17% that's actually actively working against your organization, you're causing problems. You're not solving anything. So
Mhm.
what I want leaders to do, the way I want leaders to think as they're adopting AI is to think of AI as a force multiplier.
Mhm.
The question shouldn't be how many people can we get rid of? It's what can we build today that we couldn't yesterday? What's our expanded vision look like? Where can we take this organization, this team? Where can we go to where we couldn't go yesterday?
Mhm.
Expand your vision and and use that additional capacity to do something else. Now,
Mhm.
the the slide came in timely. This IKEA example I have on the screen, I actually saw this go by in the last day or two on LinkedIn,
Wow.
and it's exactly what I'm talking about. At IKEA, AI replaced 8,500 customer service roles. Didn't need them anymore, right? But instead of realizing that short-term ROI on a spreadsheet, they kept them. They kept all 8,500 people and they retrained them into another role. And that other role brought in an additional I think it's 1.4 billion extra dollars in revenue. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's those types of organizations that have that mindset right there that are going to flourish in the age of AI. And they're going to go out and they're going to create things that they could only imagine in years prior. AI is impactful. It's an incredible tool. I use it almost every day.
Mhm.
And we're going to be able to accomplish so many more things. But we have to be careful to not destroy the long term along the way. If we start using it as a cost savings tool to get rid of headcount, all we're going to do is kill our engagement levels and hurt us in the long run.
You know, the way you described that, it brought back a memory. Yeah, if people feel like you're bringing in AI to do, force reductions, right, to replace people, it reminds me of the experience I had when we had a new sector president, a new guy to come in and run like a giant part of this one company.
Mhm.
And he was a finance guy and he was from GE and he implemented a whole new layer on top of our culture that every year after the reviews, the bottom 20% are going to just get terminated.
Yeah.
And that was for him to constantly replenish people who were not working those 55 hours, the people who were not,
Mhm.
like fighting to the front and shining all the time, right? And
Right.
what that did within 2 years, it completely destroyed all the teamwork.
Yeah.
People were hiding information and only revealing it in meetings when management were present. And, there was very hard to get anyone to cooperate. And it really destroyed that sector over the next 5 years, right? And
Right.
that's the same kind of like axe I could see hanging over people's heads when they see AI getting implemented as a way to start like weeding people out and reducing the number of people in the company, right?
Right. Yeah. And you say he came from GE, right?
Yeah.
So that's a Jack Welch behavior.
Yeah.
Like I told you, I've been a fan of leadership for a long time, and one of the best quotes I've always liked, and therefore I thought Jack Welch was this incredible leader. was before you're a leader, it's all about you. After you become a true leader, it's all about everybody else, right? It's all about taking care of everybody around you. And I always tried to live up to that, right? It's not about me, it's about my staff, it's about the people that I have the privilege to serve. And
Hmm.
then I found out that he implemented at GE that process where every year they cut 10% of their staff,
Yeah.
and the chaos that that caused within General Electric.
Yeah.
And so I no longer, every once in a while I'll throw the quote out, but I no longer attribute Jack Welch to be a great leader because I don't believe that that's the way to go. That's not the way you work this. That's not the proper way to lead an organization through change.
It might be great if you're at Glengarry Glen Ross, but it's not great if you need
Right,
teamwork.
right.
Hey, another question here on the AI front
Yeah.
is if a leader was listening to this podcast, and I know that
Mhm.
within this group we have here today, there's several leaders. If they were listening to this podcast, if they could only do one thing differently starting next Monday, what would you tell them with
Yeah.
regards to AI, right?
Yeah, so I would focus on their direct reports, right? The thing that I would recommend is if you don't have one-on-ones with your direct reports, schedule them. Get them on the books. Make them highly structured. Make that time you spend with those direct reports highly valuable. Start developing SMART goals. I've always asked for two professional and one personal goal because as a leader, you're responsible, and you don't hear this a lot, but you're responsible not only for their professional development, but you're also responsible for their personal development. Now,
Mhm.
they may not want to share a personal goal, right? And they have the right to not share it if they don't want to. Then you write down unspecified personal goal. The key
Mhm.
is in those structured one-on-ones I mentioned above. Um, you use that time to also ask about goals, right? How are
Mhm.
you doing on your goals? Where are you at? Do you have any roadblocks? Is there anything I can take care of you? And that includes the unspecified personal goal. Hey, you didn't tell me what that was, and that's okay, but how are you doing on that? Is that coming along? Just to spur the thought. Um, I very much dislike organizations that do goals once a year at evaluation time, right? You
Mhm.
you set goals, you put it in the HR package, and away it goes for the year until you come back and revisit it and go, oh, I didn't do a thing towards that goal. That's not
Mhm.
the way goals should work. You should set them and work towards them. Also, in your one-on-one times, take the opportunity at the end of the one-on-one to ask the vulnerable questions. Hey, can I be doing anything better? Right? As
Mhm.
your leader, can I be doing anything better? Do you need something different from me? Am I not paying attention to something that you think I should? Is something going on that I just don't see? And it's
Mhm.
those vulnerable questions that you ask of your staff that opens the situation up to ensure all three psychological conditions: meaningfulness, safety, and availability. This one would focus on safety, right? If you're asking those questions and soliciting honest feedback, pretty soon, once they feel safe doing that, you'll hear things that will make you a better leader. So
Mhm.
take advantage of that. Um, Structured one-on-ones and making sure everybody's working on smart goals. This is one of the most powerful things a leader can do at any level. And again, it's setting your team up to be able to adapt to change, to be able to take on any task that comes their way, and that includes adopting AI. If you have a fully engaged team and they're firing on all cylinders and they have all three psychological conditions to make them feel engaged at work, then you can go out and solve anything and accomplish incredible tasks.
That's an interesting, very interesting point right there. And I'm going to tell you that it was always my habit. I was an executive in four different Fortune 500 companies, right? And my habit was I would have a one-on-one with every employee in my organization, even below my direct reports, at least 30 minutes.
Yep.
Every quarter, I had to talk to each one of them. And I was soliciting feedback and I was also trying to understand what they were doing and understand like if there's any help that I could do. anything I could change within the organization, right?
Yeah.
And I have to tell you that years later, I still receive emails from these people, right? The people that work for me. And yeah, that's a very important part is making them feel important and that their opinions, their insights, and what they do is valuable to me. As
Right.
someone will um, maybe have to approve the rating in the review that their manager gives them right at the end of the
Right.
year.
Right. Right. You're investing in them, right? And you're showing vulnerability, and that makes them feel safe. As long as you don't, make them pay for that question, right? You can't do that. You have to take that feedback and let it reveal things about you as a leader that you can change and that you can improve on.
Now, from a personal philosophy perspective, you describe building the four pillars framework on post-it notes at
I did.
2 a.m. What made you realize that this was bigger than IT?
Yeah. How much time do we have? It's 9:06. Can I go for a bit here?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
people will drop off if they run out of time, and you and I will quit when we're done
All
saying
right.
interesting things. How's that
Well,
sound?
this is a long story, but
Okay.
I'll try to cut to the chase. The scene was this was the worst corporate culture I had ever experienced. There was no eye contact in the hallway. There was no uh, employees didn't talk to each other. They sat in their cubes and did their work. Leaders would disappear from this organization, and you wouldn't find out for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden their office would be empty. And really, what you would think that they were on vacation, but nope, they were walked out 4 weeks ago. And so, as far as psychological conditions for engagement, this organization was 0 for 3. It didn't have meaningfulness, it didn't have safety, it didn't have availability. But then one day, our CIO said, "Man, we've got a morale problem." And I was thinking to myself, "Yeah, you're not kidding." Um, but he was soliciting for feedback, and he said, "You know what? Go talk to your teams. Tell us, come back, and we'll meet, and you can tell me what we can do to make IT better." Um, so I was energized. I was like a kid in a candy store. I have an opportunity here to move the needle, right? I have an opportunity to provide constructive feedback and to try to make our little piece of the world a better place. And so I engaged with my teams. We created lists of um, of what we could do, and it was a pretty long laundry list of things. And then we got to the day to where it was time to give the feedback. And and we go into this meeting room, and it's a smaller meeting room than really what we needed. So we're kind of crammed in there, and it's a little warmer than it should be. So we're all sweating profusely. Um, and he asks, "Okay, what do you got?" And then there's 2 minutes of silence, right? When you work in an organization where there's no safety, it's very hard to give feedback. The only thing you could hear, the only thing that I could hear in that room was my own heartbeat because it was beating out of my chest. And after a couple of minutes of everybody looking at each other, I finally raised my hand and I worked up enough courage to say, "Look, this is my opportunity." And he was like, "All right, Gary, go ahead." And I talked for the next 15 minutes with all of these ideas that we could employ to make our IT department a better place to be. And we got to the end of that. And again, it was followed by complete silence. And he was just kind of sitting there. He's like, "Okay, I think that's enough for today." And I could tell he was visibly upset. He was shaken by what I had said. And so I was scared to death. And so he called the meeting to a close. Everybody started to get up, and he said, "Gary, can you stick around?" And I'm like, "Oh man, here we go." So I thought I was done, but I wasn't done. And what happened next was very cool, and I'll never forget it in my life. Really, we moved the meeting to his office, and we had an impassioned discussion. It was heated, it was emotional, but it was very respectful. And there was no animosity there at all. We were just two people talking. and talking with everything we had. And we were going down this rabbit trail and that rabbit trail, and he finally stopped me, and he asked me, and this is the question that started it all. He was like, "I don't get it, Gary. I don't get it. What do you consider good IT?" And I'm like, and I did what everybody would do when they can't answer a question when they're backed in the corner. I was like, "What kind of question is that?" I don't know. Good IT is a lot of things. Good IT is not a lot of other things. And I was kind of stumbling through it. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. But he had asked an incredibly great question. And so I took the laundry list of ideas and I took them home with me that night. And I started out on post-it notes. And so I'd put the idea on post-it notes and I'm sticking them on the wall. And I started to distill the thought, right? And I started to categorize and analyze and add things and take things away. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. And in the middle of the night, about 2:30, I realized two things. First thing I realized is that sticky notes, post-it notes, don't necessarily stick for very long, right? So especially if you're moving them around, they only got two or three moves in them before they start giving up the stickiness. And
Mhm.
so I had a pile of sticky notes on the floor, and I was trying to figure out where they go. And the other thing I realized is that sometimes I'm just not the sharpest tool in the shed because I'm an IT guy, and I have access to Trello, and Trello looks suspiciously like Post-it notes. And I'm working alone, so I have no reason to be on a wall in my house with Post-it notes. There's nobody watching me but me. So I moved everything to Trello, and I continued distilling the thought throughout the night. And I got to the point where it was time to start to get ready for work. And I took a step back and I looked at what was there. And the four pillars that were there that we've spoken to today were the four pillars that I had that night. And so, vision, people, process, customer. You do those four things, you have an organization that's firing on all cylinders. And I realized that that doesn't just apply to IT departments. You can take this foundation to anywhere, to any industry, to any team size, and you can apply them and immediately start to increase the value that your team or organization generates. So I can do this at the CIO level, I can do this to a two-man team. So you take these concepts and you apply them, and you immediately start to increase value and you start to increase engagement within whatever sphere of influence you have. So what began as an IT question um, really became a foundational framework for leadership itself. And what began as one sleepless night for me became a blueprint for the kind of organization where people can choose to go to, can choose to stay and to grow and have a I want to say it, have a good time while you're at work, right?
Mhm.
I love having a good time. I love producing a lot of great value, high-fiving everybody around me. Look at what we did as a team. And that's really what the four pillars did. But it was really the next morning where I said, wow, this applies everywhere. And then from there, now this was many years ago, from there I put a book together and it was terrible and it was just my opinion. But here in the last couple of years, I've had the ability to understand the why, and to back it with data. And there's significant data out there to back what I've always felt as to be leadership deficiencies, things we could do better as leaders in any organization. So that's how these came together.
Yeah, I told this to you before, one of the times we spoke, that that story about the post-it notes and you working all night reminds me of that Tom Cruise movie called Jerry Maguire.
Yeah,
He's the sports agent and he's at a conference and then he has this epiphany, this bright light goes off in his head that the way they're engaging with their clients was completely wrong. And he spent the whole night writing this manifesto about how they should be doing their business to serve the clients better,
yeah,
right? And he he wrote the thing, he copied it, he handed it out to all of his coworkers, and when he goes into work the next day, all of his coworkers stand up and they're clapping right,
Yeah.
as they come in, because he really like identified the vision, right, and how to be
Right.
people centered and how to have a better process. It was kind of like your four pillars. And the funny thing is all the other agents loved it, but management fired him the next day. That was like not the safe environment that you
No,
were talking about at all, right?
no.
That's what you probably feared was getting the Jerry Maguire treatment. And if you
Right.
haven't seen that movie, everyone on
I,
the webinar today, Jerry Maguire is a movie from like 20 years ago or so with Tom Cruise. It's really a great story, and it's based on a true story. You should really see that movie. Hey, why don't you remind us of what these QR codes are here? Give people
sure.
another chance to scan them.
Sure. Let me share them again. So this
They're right there behind you on your background.
yeah, I'm going to bring up bigger ones if that's okay.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure.
Share. So this is if anybody wants to get in contact with me. Um, this will get you to GaryCMannis.com. There's a contact me section there on that site. There's also more information about the engagement crisis. It's not available for purchase yet. I'm working on that. I'm working to get it published. And I just want to remind everybody, I want to take this opportunity to remind everybody that the engagement crisis didn't arrive suddenly, right? Michael's question from before was perfect, actually. It's been here for a while. It's been here for a generation or two. And it's not going to end suddenly either, right? But we need to start with one leader, one decision, one organization at a time. So pick up the baton, pursue best practice leadership principles, apply the four pillars of leadership if you so dare. Pick up a copy of the book. I'll do the shameless plug for the book when it becomes available, and really take that on as leaders. Your responsibility as a leader is far greater than you think, right? You're responsible for the professional and personal development of the people that you lead. And this is important, and it's my passion. So this will get you to GaryCMannis.com. The next one is with the book. I put together a toolkit with various things in it. I think I mentioned it earlier, like structured one-on-ones, my recommended structure for that. A
Mm.
SMART goal worksheet, sample leader behavior compact. I think I mentioned stewardship maturity index. So I've published all those tools for free. Just there are PDFs available to download. Um, you can download them, take the content, use them as you see fit within your organization. This will get you to the access request page, and it's
Mm.
simple. Tell me about yourself a little bit. I do have a survey on the second page that's optional, but once you submit that, it'll present you with a link, and that link is widely available. So you click on that link, bookmark it, so it's available to you at any time, and those tools in the toolkit will be available to you. And I'll add as I go, as I receive recommendations and or thought, we'll add to the toolkit from time to time.
Very generous of you to offer this. I know that's because you're very passionate about having impact and helping
You bet.
change leadership. I had one question. I don't know if this is something that you took note of in your research. You said that in US, the engagement across the country, all companies, is roughly 31% of the employee base.
Mhm.
Are there other companies that have a higher average engagement level?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, the data I showed you of the benefits. Let me go back to that. Of the benefits to high engagement, were all taken from Gallup examples of companies that had a higher engagement. So share.
I was thinking sociologically, like if certain cultures have higher engagement, like the
Yeah.
Japanese or the Swedes or anyone like
Um,
that.
Japan is a very proper country. But I didn't research it from a country perspective,
Okay.
from a societal perspective. I just did it from an organization, and certainly I remember companies like Google, um, and there were several others. I have them listed in my book. I don't remember them offhand, but there were several examples of companies with high engagement, and they're shining examples of what what you can have.
Mm,
Also in the book, I use a composite narrative called North Star Dynamics, and it's just a way to tell a story, and it's really a composite from all the experiences I've had, and it takes us through a story of North Star Dynamics as a new CEO arrives, kind of like Doug Conant did at Campbell Soup, and how she went about fixing the engagement problem and how she turned around the organization. It wasn't faltering, it was just kind of wandering, right? And so
mm.
new CEO came in, provided direction. I also provide an epilogue, which is kind of unusual in a nonfiction book. But I have an epilogue about how that company fared during economic crisis in the future. So there's that part of the story too.
No, that's fascinating. Well, we've gone significantly over time, and that's quite
Yeah.
generous of you again. I appreciate your hanging in there and continuing to add to the discussion. Michael, he mentioned great tips and insight, guys. Thank you, and thank you for your questions, Mike. Really appreciate that engagement. And Gary, any closing words before we sign off for tonight?
No, just what I said on my contact me slide, right? The engagement crisis didn't happen overnight, to Michael's point. It's not going to be fixed overnight. However, change is here, right? The age of AI is here. Your staff needs to be engaged in order to really adopt AI in the best way possible. So pick up the baton, think about it. Think about what a higher engagement level of your staff would really mean and look like. And I wish the best for everybody.
Thanks again, Gary, and good luck when your book comes out next month. And I'll have to get my copy. I'll have to order one from you'll have to share where are
Awesome.
we able to order this book? Do you know?
We're going to be able to order it anywhere. It's going to be on Amazon.
Amazon.
That's probably the best place to go. I'll have a direct link to order it directly from the from Ingram Spark. So we'll have that once it's published too.
Okay. Have a good evening, Gary. Have a good
Yep.
evening, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity, Mark.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you, Gary.
Yep.
Bye now.
Bye.
In a world so connected, it's hard to stand out. But I've got a secret that I'm about to shout. Building bridges and making friends, that's how the journey of success begins. Surround yourself with diverse minds, experts in their field so wise. Together we'll conquer and achieve. Customize your growth, there's nothing you can't conceive. Build your network, reach for the stars. Professional advantage taking you far. Communication and leadership, it's all in your hands. Unlock your potential with your dreaming span. Surround yourself with diverse minds, experts in their field so wise. Together we'll conquer and achieve. In a world so connected.